Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good morning to Sir Hafiz and all my fellow classmates. So for today, my group will be presenting on the fourth section of the novel Reading Lolita in Tehran, a memoir in books written by Azar Nafisi. So I will be the first presenter, Dayang Normasita will be the second presenter, Nur Fatih Nadia binti Muhammad Rashid will be the third presenter, and Nina Kamarina binti Kamaruddin will be the last presenter. So let's get to know a little bit about Jane Austen, the author of the novel Pride and Prejudice, that is used as a source of reference in the novel Reading Lolita in Tehran by Azar Nafisi. So Jane Austen, she was born on 16th of December 1775. She is the second daughter, but the seventh child. Second daughter, but seventh child. Her parents, Cassandra and George Austen, they are well-respected community member. Jane's father, he was a rector. So basically he was a scholar. So Jane and her siblings are raised by their parents in a manner where the parents encourage them to love reading, to love books and critical thinking. So Jane Austen, she was close to her sister, which is also named Cassandra, like the mother. And they went to boarding school at one point in their life, but stopped halfway because they caught some disease, and also due to some financial problems. So when they stopped learning at the boarding school, they just stayed home, and Jane has this bound book where she used to write all her poems or prose that she has written in that book. And some days or some evenings she would pick a prose or a poem to read to her family. That's how she developed her passion in writing and in finding her own voice, her own way of creating a story. Jane Austen, she was not famous during her time. She started to her reputation started to skyrocket during the early 20th century. Why? Because entering 20th century, people started to become open to the concept of love and reality, and Jane Austen has this way of writing stories that ends up with happy endings. So people like that, and as we all know, most of the themes of her novels that she has written centers around the theme of love. So yeah, I guess that is why her readers find her writings timeless, because love is a timeless thing. It exists back then, it exists now, and it will continue to exist even in the future. So I think that is one of the strongest reasons why her writings are timeless. So now let's get to know about the novel Pride and Prejudice that is written by Jane Austen. So Pride and Prejudice is one of the romantic novels that Jane Austen has ever written. Um, and its first draft's name was First Impression before it was published with the title of Pride and Prejudice. So basically, the novel Pride and Prejudice centers around the relationship between Elizabeth Bennet and also Fitzwilliam Darcy, an aristocratic landowner. Dayang will further explain about the plot of the book Pride and Prejudice. But what's important is that the key theme, I would say, of the novel is it revolves around the theme of love. It shows how love wins above everything, above money and above status. It's a very interesting book, and I would say that the plot or the book is very relatable even nowadays.
Hello, my name is Zaina Masita binti Abang Abdul Latif, and I will be presenting on the second part of this presentation, which is summary or overview of the last section, reading Lolita in Tehran, which is Austen. Okay, before I proceed with the overview or the summary of last section, I would love to share about Pride and Prejudice, which is a novel written by Jane Austen in 1833. So basically, this whole novel, Pride and Prejudice, is about Mr. Bennet of Longbourn Estate has 5 daughters, but his property can only be passed through a male heir. His wife also has lack of inheritance, so his family will be destitute upon his death. Hence, it is very important or crucial that at least one of the daughter to marry well in order to support the other the whole family, which is a motivation that driven the whole plot. This novel basically revolves around the importance or how important it is to marry a true love instead of the money or the social prestige, despite the communal pressure to make a wealthy match. Okay, for the first part of this last section, it is from chapter 1 or sorry, chapter 1 to chapter 6. It's about delusion creeps into the regime, limited reform and realization begin to take hold. However, a new regime, coming of an age where they do not remember the horror of the Shah's regime. This generation is attracted to Western culture because the regime's ideology is like an open joke for them. Despite the beginning, Iran's best and brightest are increasingly leaving the country because after years of oppression, senseless war, and poor economic performance has given them nothing but the choice to leave the country. And interestingly and very importantly, many deeply religious people see the regime's use of Islam as a tool of oppression and an instrument of power as deeply offensive and a betrayal to the religion itself, which is Islam. Okay, so the second part of this last section, the whole topic is about leaving Iran. It's forever bubbling just below the surface and it erupts everyone at once. Azar Nafisi suddenly realized that she can no longer take it anymore. She can no longer face oppression in Iran. And most of the students, the girls, seems to come to the same realization after so many years of promise and reform that never materialized, war and oppression. The realization that one must simply live seems to hang in the air. Okay, so we have reached the last part, the third part, from chapter 13 to chapter 26. Basically, this part tells about a new wave of repression seems to have started. However, the writers are turning up dead because the regime was planned to already kill 20 writers in a fake bus accidents. Also, new raids on the coffee shop and other public place of gathering are launched with intention to find unrelated mixed sex couple. So clearly nothing has changed despite a periodic lip service to reform. Nafisi and the students, many girls, decided to leave the country. The decision seems to hit them all at once. In Nafisi's last day in Tehran, she met former student who was hardline revolutionary. Now she seems to be an open-minded lover of literature, and she even tells Nafisi that she very adore her class. Perhaps Nafisi's efforts were not in vain. So that's all.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I am Nur Fatina binti Mama Rashid, and now I will continue the presentation to talk about the issue arose in the novel and how it is significant to Austen's with Nafisi's reading Lolita in Tehran. So the first issue arose was men's privilege and women's right in marriage. We are already aware that during the era of Islamic Revolution, men were seen as the more powerful ones. So what men actually want? So men always expected women to be a virgin until they get married, and they want their wives to serve them, to obey their rules and everything that they wanted. And women's life is actually was kind of owned by men, and that is very unfair. And then there is one part in the novel where Nafisi and the students discuss about Austen's work and relate back to their reality, where they discuss about a decree made by their current president, which is President Rafsanjani, that stated men could have up to 4 official wives and as many as temporary wives as they desired. This shows how men was looked up to, and they will feel like this what lead to the feeling of owning women and have the power to control women's life. And that was about men's privilege. How about women? What women faced during that era? As we are already aware that women are always being oppressed and always being discriminated by men, especially. Women did not see life without men. They did not see life without marriage. It is like they really rely on men, and they can't do anything without men. This is what led to the feeling of more powerful by men, and they feel like they have the power, the full power to own women. And women in that area also lack of exposure to sex education, especially, and they don't know how to stand for themselves, to defend themselves, and to say no to what men want. Women, especially wife in this context, they don't have to always obey. They don't have to always say yes to the husband, because if they do not consent of what the husband want them to do, it considered as illegal according to the law nowadays. Because, for example, if the husband forced his wife to have sex with him without her consent, it can be considered as rape. So it is very unfair for women to not have their own voice, to voice out their feelings and thoughts. And men should have more sense of respect towards women. So women previously on, like in that era, women were also being pressured to get married, because if they do not get married, it means that they failed to be a good woman. And if they do not want to obey what the husband told her, they considered as bad wife. So it is very sickening and unfair to think about what women in that era have been faced. So living in this contemporary years as we are now, we can see that women are getting more independent, and they just know what are their rights. So yeah, that is all for my part, and moving on to the next part. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum and hi everyone, my name is Nina Kamarina binti Kamardin, and today I'll be presenting on the mistreatment of women in Pride and Prejudice and reading Lolita in Tehran. The first issue in Pride and Prejudice is that women does not own any property after their husband's death. So in the beginning of the novel, Jane Austen introduces the readers to a middle-class family of 7, which is Mr. Bennet, Mrs. Bennet, and their 5 children, which are Kitty, Elizabeth, Mary, Jane, and Lydia. And after the passing of Mr. Bennet, his property does not go fully or straightly to Mrs. Bennet, but back in the days, the property of the husband, which is the sole breadwinner of the family, is given to the sons. However, in this novel, the couple has 5 daughters without any sons. Therefore, the property of Mr. Bennet is channeled out to his male cousin, hence resulting to no property given to Mrs. Bennet. So the second issue is that women cannot be near men, or men cannot approach women at all. They cannot be in the same area or space at all. And this can be shown in reading Lolita in Tehran, that Nafisi mentioned about Pride and Prejudice, where Elizabeth and Darcy are always desperate to find a time and space to communicate privately, because they are always near each other publicly, and they do not have the time to talk and communicate privately. And another obvious proof to show that women and men cannot be in the same place, or women cannot approach men, is where Elizabeth was very desperate to talk to Darcy, and Darcy was making a move and approached Elizabeth, and one of the girls saw that he was making a move, and she whispered to Elizabeth that men shan't come near us, I'm determined, and something like that along the lines. And she was telling Elizabeth that we cannot be near men at all, or because they may be punished or whatnot. And that's the second issue. And the third issue is that women need to wear according to what the society perceived, because in the novel there is one scene that Elizabeth visited Netherfield because she wants to see her ill sister Jane, and she went there wearing a petticoat above a gown which is soaked in mud, and there were 2 ladies there. If I'm not mistaken, was Mrs. Catherine and Mrs. Hurst, something like that. They were judging her, they were gossiping her about her appearance, where she looks unclean, where she does not appear nicely when visiting Netherfield. and they were judging her petticoat, they were judging her hair, because the way she wears does not match the way they wear, because they are the higher and upper social class, while Elizabeth at that time was only a middle class society. So that is all for the issues surrounding mistreatment of women in Pride and Prejudice. So moving on to reading Lolita in Tehran, the first issue is the women's fate after divorce, and I have two evidence to provide this statement. The first one is when Nafisi mentioned that her father was in favor of divorce, will sue for alimony, which is the only protection for women in Islamic law, which indicates that the ex-wife or Nafisi's mother does not get a single cent from the father after the divorce. And another one is when Azin tells the whole group about her abusive relationship with the husband, and they were discussing about what the judge would do if she seeks for divorce, and they have came to a conclusion that the ruling judge would not only reject her request to file a divorce, but also blame her for her husband's beating, because she may not pleasure her and whatnot. And the second issue is that women cannot roam freely in the streets without the male supervision, specifically the family members' supervision. And this can be shown in the beginning of the novel, reading Lolita in Tehran, where after Sana's issue with hanging out with her friends, and she was sentenced to jail for a few hours, for a few days. She had to sign a document, and she was leashed for the sins that she had done. Her brother warned her, how can 6 unruly girls go for a trip without any male supervision, specifically family members supervision. So the third one is that women need to wear according to the Islamic law, and this can be proven throughout the novel. Nafisi mentioned non-stop about women need to wear veil. It is very mandatory according to the Islamic law. Women cannot wear makeup, even a slight makeup they cannot wear. They cannot even wear nail polish, because they can be punished, they can be jailed for the things that they have done, and they can be jailed if they do not abide by the law. So these are the issues in Pride and Prejudice and reading Lolita in Tehran on the mistreatment of women. And even though there's a major gap of these novels published, the issue is still relevant till this day. So that is all from me. Thank you.